Happy Thursday, Email Geeks. Welcome into the Kevin Mandeville Show, episode number 15. Happy 15, y'all. Great Thursday. I'm pumped for this weekend. My Pats right here. I got my Pats gear on. We're playing in the AFC Championship game. Our season officially begins. I even got my Email Tees Email Geek shirt rocking right here, which is a proud sponsor of the Kevin Mandeville Show. You can go to emailtees.com. That's TEES, or give a follow on Twitter and Instagram at emailtees. It's official apparel for email geeks like this, so you can rock your email geekdom, your email fandom here in 2019. Give your wardrobe a little upgrade. All the cool kids are doing it. If you haven't done it, why haven't you done it? You got to do it. Everybody's doing it. It's super cool. So emailtees.com. The show, it's a bi-weekly email show where we talk about all things email every Tuesday and Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern time. You can subscribe, kevinmandeville.com/newsletter. So for today's show, I'm doing something that we haven't done yet at all. This is a brand new format. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through the Email Geeks Slack and do a rundown of all the latest topics that are being talked about. And I'm going to talk about the ones that are of interesting to me and things that I think should be interesting to know. Cool resources, articles, etc. So we're just going to do a whole rundown of that. So if you don't know what the Email Geek Slack is and you're watching this show, you definitely need to be a part of it. You can go to email.geeks.chat to apply. It's totally free. There's no payments involved. There's no subscription involved. It's totally free to join. All the cool kids are there. There's over like 4,000 people now at this point. Yeah. So everybody who's doing cool stuff in email marketing, they're living here, helping each other out, answering questions. So I'm going to run down a few of the different channels. And given that email code is my area of expertise, that's my favorite channel and where I live and hang out. So I'm going to talk about some cool points and discussions here. So a question that was asked this morning by Mohammed was around background images and Android 5.1 and 6 not showing. And so Android 5.1 and 6 do not support background images. Android 5.1 and above uses the native mail app of the Android OS operating system when it's talking about it in these render testing services of Litmus and Email on Acid. But Android 5.1 and above, it switched to using the Gmail app as a default email app. So these native source email apps of the Android OS don't really exist in the wild anymore. They still exist in the Android OS, but there isn't any dominant market share for it. So I wouldn't really worry too much about it. For Android 5.1 and above, just worry about getting your email to render properly in the Gmail app. Android 4.4 and below uses the native source email app of the Android OS, but that supports background images, media queries, all that stuff. There's a few good articles on Litmus around understanding sort of the Android app ecosystem. Let's see, other questions. Kate asked how she would build this sort of header section here with this image. And the way that I would do it is just split it up into two separate table rows and table cells to where you have this top table cell with a blue background, and then you could nest that content one row with the protection summary headline. And then what you would do for this image is you would just split it into two. So you would have the top half split be in its own table row within the table cell with the blue background. And then you would have a table cell with a white background below it with the bottom half sliced image. So fairly typical way to implement that type of design. And that's how I'll go about doing it. Caleb asked about emojis, and he says he's been using them in their subject lines, and now he wants to try them out in the pre-header preview text, which is also visible in the email. And he wants to know what the support is. My experience with this is that most emoji support, it comes down to the email client and then the operating system. So OSs have different emoji support and different ways in which they display the emojis. That's where you see a lot of discrepancies. But in terms of whether they actually display the emoji or not, how it handles it in the subject line is typically how it's going to handle it in the preview text. There's really not going to be a lot of differences there. Litmus has another good resource all about the sort of an ultimate guide to emojis support where subscribers can see them. And by the way, full disclosure, former employee of Litmus, and I was involved in a lot of this content. So I can, when I'm giving a lot of references, it's just what I know because I was involved with a lot of that content, and I can give my backing and stamp of approval with it. Let's see. Remy asked a good question around making square bullet lists in the Outlook Microsoft Word rendering engine for the 2007-2019 versions on Windows. And Brandon just gave the good recommendation. You can use CSS of list style type square to make that work. So that's a good little thing. And, most people typically have used just creating tables for lists, but there are ways in which you can actually make lists format correctly in Outlook now without having to do special hacks, which is good. Devin asks, is there any reason to still be using the center tag in 2019, or is that bad practice now? No, there's nothing wrong with using the center tag. It's still acceptable, or it's still rendered, I should say, by rendering engines. So there isn't any negative consequences to using it. Conversely, if you still want to use margin auto and align center as a combination for other designs or as enhancements, feel free to do that as well. But there is no negative impact to using the center tag. So if you want to use the center tag to center things, go right ahead. I don't use it typically apart from maybe a parent wrapper sometimes, just because it gets a bit bloated with the HTML if you can just achieve all of that stuff in CSS. Sarah asked about having display block attribute in her email and it's adding extra margin to the side. Any tips? Didn't see any code posted here. Around this, though, it's important to note how displays will affect padding and margins. So if you're using things like display block nested in display block, which is the inherent behavior, your padding is going to get thrown off because it doesn't behave like table cells, which is what a lot of people in email development are familiar with. So, make sure you're setting things to be display table and table cell if you want it to behave that way. Or you could use box sizing border box to inherit sort of that parent width. So just make sure you're understanding what the display is set as and how it's going to inherit and adjust to any margin or padding you're adding. And again, Jordy asks, I'm creating a newsletter with HTML and I can't figure out the code to make it responsive. Again, just it's not a point to pick on Sarah or Jordy at all here, but when you're posting things, please post as much information as you can so that people can help you. So provide specific details over what specific email client you're looking at, the exact issue, along with screenshots, ideally a litmus or email and acid test, and posting your code. And ideally, please don't upload your code directly to Slack because that's a non-starter for me. To me, this needs to become a best practice where you're sharing your code through a link. So you're either sharing a code pen, a Litmus Builder link. Please share your code publicly so that it's easily accessible so we can easily start inspecting it in the browser. If you can't do that, it's really just a non-starter. You're asking us to take all this extra time to have to copy and paste code in and out of Slack. So please, screenshots, links, clear description when you're asking for code help. Let's see who else. Tyberger asked a question on background colors with the TD. He asked if you need to use the HTML attribute or if you could use CSS. And by the way, all of my advice around this is excluding Lotus Notes or IBM Notes because I don't test there. But yeah, using just regular CSS background for standard background colors is going to work just fine. That's well supported. It's only once you get into background images to where you have extra considerations for Outlook, and that's when you start to needing to use the HTML attribute or VML fallbacks. But just standard background colors, you can use CSS for that, no problem. Wasif asks, has anybody had issues with anchor links? Anchor links, not really well supported in email. I would not recommend using them at all. If you're trying to achieve or mimic some type of effect, in my opinion, it's better to create interactivity to display, to hide and show content. So that's what I would recommend instead. Sujal Patel asked a quick question around optimizing your email for Gmail on mobile. He says Gmail's ignoring his classes. I didn't see anything wrong with the CSS here. My suspicion is that there's something within his full code. Again, the full code wasn't posted. Please do that. My suspicion is that there is something in the CSS that is invalid that Gmail deems it to be invalid. Gmail has a very strict CSS parser now. It's going to strip anything that it doesn't support. Remy Parmentier has a fantastic blog around troubleshooting Gmail's responsive design, which is still relevant today. That post is over 2 years old now, but still relevant today. So check that out. Make sure you're going through the whole list. Make sure you're not doing anything that Gmail does not support. That's what it doesn't like and where you run into issues there. LA Rock or La Rock, not sure what the name is. Has anyone seen deliverability issues using the pre-header hack and ZWNJ and MBSP? If you don't know about that, again, there's another good blog on Limits that broke this technique down. You can use a preview text hack to create space after your preview text. And what's nice about this is that your preview text can then be as short as you want it to be. And then it's just going to create visual space after it so that you don't run into any alt text or just other body content copy of the email. It's going to be just unique preview text. And it actually looks really cool on mobile because it really creates a lot of visual hierarchy differentiation between the emails. I have seen in the past some people complain about deliverability issues using it. Personally speaking, anecdotally speaking, I've not seen that. But I have seen other people say that that's happened. So just watch out for it. But I would still recommend it and still use it. I use it on every single email that I send. So I don't have any issues with it at all. Corey Johnson asks, is it pretty safe to use shorthand padding? Yes, it is. Shorthand padding is surprisingly supported pretty much everywhere, even Outlook. So there's no issues there. And then I believe there was one more talking about fonts. Yeah, Ty Berger also asked, our client has sent us Gotham and Gotham book in it. We set up a fallback CSS stack. And the problem is he was seeing Times New Roman on Outlook. And this is just a bug with Outlook to where if you have your definition of your font family with the custom web font in line, Outlook isn't going to render that properly, and then it's going to default to Times New Roman instead, regardless of what you have set as your inline fallback font. So the way to get around this is just to add a simple Outlook conditional styling to where you overwrite the font family of the font just for Outlook. So you can do if MSO with your style block and then whatever sort of element tags you want to apply the font family to, you can do that. Or if you're linking to it through an external link, you can always exclude it. Or you can do what I do or have always typically done is you can just use the at font or at media, wrap your at font face declaration if you're using that method and wrap it in an at media. And then that's how you get around it. So there's a bunch of different ways you can go about getting around it. But just note that if you're not doing anything special with your web fonts and you're including the web font declaration inline, you will get Times New Roman fallback issues in Outlook windows with the Microsoft Word rendering engine, our favorite. Okay, that's enough time in email code here. Let me jump around into a few others, some interesting topic points. We'll hop over to email design. Ryan Fleming asks, I got an email with the 12.6 megabyte GIF in it, hashtag team GIF, by the way. Apparently they use a company called Playable. Anyone know how they're getting around the GIF size? So if you don't know Playable.video is a company that they sort of do what they call video in your email. And they even do live streaming in the email, which I haven't figured out how that works yet. I need to tear apart their emails a little bit more. But a lot of their video stuff is just using standard video techniques that we've all seen. And it's just targeting email clients in different ways. So it's using things like CSS animations for mobile iOS or automatic playing looping videos for Apple Mail, Outlook for Mac, animated GIFs for clients like Outlook Windows and Gmail. It's just targeting different email clients to serve up different environments. And obviously, if they're using high quality video, something like 12.6 megabytes is obviously very easily doable and achievable. I'm not quite sure about this question saying how are they getting around the GIF size. I personally would never send an email with the 10 plus megabyte, even a 5 plus megabyte GIF in it. To me, that's too big. And it's not an ideal experience for users because it could create slow download speeds and just sort of lag to load the email. So I would always avoid that. I don't recommend sending out an email with a megabyte that large. I would definitely always stay 5 megabytes or below. I would definitely try to stay between 1 to 2 megabytes at max. But, it sort of depends on your audience too. I mean, if you have a heavy desktop audience and that's where they're opening their email, you're going to have a lot of people who can handle a 12.6 megabyte GIF now. I just don't think it's a best practice or recommended, but it's important to point out that there are no limits to image file sizes in email. So there's nothing, there's no issues there. It's really just a user experience issue. And then there was another good discussion asking about what width should desktop emails be in 2019. I actually need to do a whole separate video about this in a blog post. But personally speaking, I don't think that there should ever really be a limit on width for the most part. Like in terms of there shouldn't be a one-fits-all approach. To me, it's all about optimizing for the viewport. And a lot of people don't optimize emails for large monitor desktop views now. So really, I like to go as large as the viewport goes. That's reasonable. I mean, I've scaled emails up to be 1800 pixels wide. So to me, go as wide as the viewport allows. And if you're using a mobile first approach, which is what you should be doing from a development aspect, regardless of whether your audience is or not, maybe that's a separate topic for a separate day, but you should easily be able to scale up your designs. If you can't scale up your designs that easily, you don't have your emails coded correctly, in my opinion. You're not using it in a modern approach. You're trying to do a one-fits-all approach, and you're not using a flexible system. So to me, it should be mobile first and be fluid and account for smaller viewports, but you should be able to scale up easily to something like 1200, 1400, 1600, 1800, 2000 pixels, no problem. That's my opinion. And that's, there's a lot more to get into, separate topic for a separate day, but that's my take on it. All right, what else is there? Email ESP. There is some news in the ESP world. Campaign Monitor has now acquired Sailthrough and Live Clicker. And so now Campaign Monitor, who just last June acquired Delivra and Emma, so including Campaign Monitor itself, the Campaign Monitor group, which is now the new parent company, owns 4 ESPs, which is pretty wild. And I would not really enjoy, because I'm assuming they're going to have to integrate all of those ESPs into Campaign Monitor at some point. But I think the Live Clicker acquisition makes a ton of sense. Being able to take that dynamic content functionality of Live Clicker and integrating it directly into its ESP, that's what gives them a competitive advantage. I'm surprised more ESPs have not invested into dynamic content or interactive email, but you're starting to see it now. Salesforce acquired Rebel for interactive email content. Now Campaign Monitor's acquired Live Clicker. It's just a really good competitive advantage and feature differentiation if you can have that powerful technology. There are no details on the acquisition prices. The only reported data was that there is nearly 60 million in revenue and 540 new customers across the 2 acquisitions of Sailthrough and Live Clicker. So it'll be interesting to see what Campaign Monitor does there with all of that. Let's see, what else was there? That was about the ESP news. In email marketing, there was a Jonathan Pay. They're doing a survey as well and a prize draw. They're planning on doing a marketing attribution report. And so they want you to just fill out a simple survey. So the Bounce X email marketing attribution survey, it's just a quick type form. So if you work in that world, do that. One of the prize draws is for €200 Amazon vouchers. So sounds like a no-brainer to me if you work in that. I personally don't work in that, so I don't really have insight to offer, but that would be a cool thing to just do and hop in on. Another question in email marketing was, and I forgot about this because I talked about an automation workflow tool in one of my previous episodes. Adrian, I'm not even going to try to attempt to pronounce his last name, asked about about a directory of email automation programs. And I forgot because I'd actually gone over this resource on my former podcast, emaildrips.com. Emaildrips.com goes over actual email sequencing. And so that's one of the few resources that sort of is a really good emails for email automation and actual drip series and triggered and automated email series. So check out emaildrips.com. It's a cool resource for that. All right. What else do we have to go over? We've gone over email code, design, ESP, marketing. And then I guess just to round out the show with some fun, talking about the topics of random. Slack has made the news. Slack is all the latest talk here with its redesign. And a lot of people don't like it, including myself. I don't get it. Slack's new logo, it doesn't represent the amazing hashtag that they had. The hashtag was so perfect and iconic. And to be honest with you, I just don't really agree with a lot of the design decisions for it. And what I love about it is, of course, somebody came in and designed a better Slack logo that solved all the problems. To me, this Slack logo right here, boom, done, solves all the problems, keeps everything. And I don't mind the type form, the typography redesign either. That was barely noticeable. But yeah, so Slack's redesigned. I think it's funny because I think a lot of companies now are redesigning for the sake of redesigning, and it's really just a way to market and promote their brands and sort of newsjack the media a bit. It's funny because I feel like we see more redesigned logos than ever. And especially for a company like Slack, they have a million other things, better things to do, more important things to do than redesign their logos. So that's been the talk of the town over on Random lately. And in general, there were a couple good things. Let's see. I'm trying to do all this off of memory right now. I'm running out. Oh yes. Speaking of rebrands, .mailer is no longer. It's now .digital, and of course the .digital engagement cloud. Sam joked that it's the worst name he's ever heard, which I say, nay. That is IBM Watson campaign automation. Gonna be hard to ever beat that one, in my opinion. Let's see, what else was there? Oh yeah, the things I learned. Remy had pointed out that before Gmail, the email client, Gmail was literally a free service on the Garfield website for email with Catitude. I did not know that. That is pretty wild. And Remy had also talked about somewhere here in the thread. Yeah, also talking about load time, which we had mentioned before with that previous thread in email design. It is better practice to have as few files as possible. So not all file sizes or number of assets are equal. So if you have 10 megabytes, it's better to have one file at 10 megabytes than it is to have 10 images that equal 10 megabytes, because there are more requests for the 10 images that the browser or the end client has to go back and forth to download. Whereas if it's just one asset, it's only making one trip. Think of it if you were trying to empty your car with groceries, right? If you have a ton of groceries, you'd have to make all these trips. Whereas if you could just have everything in one cart and make that one cart, it might be slower to push a heavier thing, but it's still going to be faster overall than all those separate requests. So it's always best to have as fewer files as possible, while also still trying to minimize your file size, but try to keep that as small as possible. There's some talk about what editors you use, and I think I need to do a whole separate blog post and video someday over my personal workflow. As it relates to email, I use Litmus Builder. Again, biased, take it what you want. I actually helped build Litmus Builder as a former Litmus employee, so a lot of it's tuned to my own liking, and I use Atom for web development. There's a thread over special characters using, they don't sound great with speech assistants, voiceover assistants, so don't use those for tweets or emails, things like that. And then, yeah, Litmus State of Email Survey. Still fill that out while you have time. It benefits everybody in the community. It'll take you about 30, 45 minutes maybe, but it's totally worth it. And, you can win some free Litmus swag or even a ticket to Litmus Live. All right, well, I think that's enough. We're running out of time here. So that's this rundown 2019. Is this helpful, beneficial to do a rundown of this, point out interesting things in Email Geek Slack, answer some questions with my own input, maybe that I didn't do in real time? Would love to know your feedback. So let me know down below in the comments. And hey, mark your calendar, Email Geek Swag. All right, I'm out. Go Pats, baby. See you next week.